Alright, it's a little bit hot in the shed today, but I'm just going to show you how you make a wood finish with Xanthorrhoea resin. Interesting little bit of history, alright. It's quite a practical thing to do if you're into kind of woodwork. But one of the really interesting things, if you study Australian plants, alright, as I do, and very interested in all the different uses of them, there's usually they're used in two ways. So obviously we have the indigenous Aboriginal use of the plant, right? And then later on, when the Europeans come, they found this completely different way to use the plant, right? And it's quite interesting, these two different cultures, and it kind of says a lot about them, the way that they found uses for different plants, right? And Xanthorrhoea resin, right, is a really good example of this, right? And I'm going to show you the traditional kind of European use for this plant, all right? But traditionally for Australian native peoples, this was used the glue. A little bit similar to pine pitch, all right? It's a little bit more tricky than pine pitch, but that's how it was done. Would be mixed with ash and mixed with kangaroo dung and made into a glue to either make a spearhead or to repair something like a canoe or a coulamon or something like that. Okay, but when the Europeans came along, they found another use for it, and that was as a finish for furniture. All right, and in this time period of sort of the 19th century and the early part of the 20th century, you had a lot of people, and they were just living out in the scrub, and they didn't have much. All right, what they probably had was tools. Okay, they would make their own house, something like this, like a kind of tin shed or a shack or whatever. They would make their own homestead. They would probably make most of their own furniture, tables and chairs and stools and benches and those kind of things. And they wanted things to look nice. They wanted things to have a nice appearance, okay? And with furniture, how it was traditionally done was to use shellac, all right, and make a French polish, all right? But that's quite expensive, okay? And a lot of these people, they just didn't have any money really, okay? So they found that they can get a kind of similar result and do something similar with this Xanthorrhoea resin, okay? And that's how the Europeans used it. The Xanthorrhoea itself is a very interesting plant. We could do a whole video just talking about all the different uses of this plant. There's several different species for Australia. Okay, the resin can vary in colour from more of a red to more of a yellow. Okay, you get big ones, you get small ones. There's multiple species. When a bushfire goes through the landscape, all right, and we've got to remember that fire is part of the natural landscape here. The resin will excrete from the plant, all right, and I take it this is part of the defense mechanism of the plant, and then you can just collect it for nothing, all right. So I'm just going to take this. I'm going to show you how you make a poor man's shellac or a poor man's French polish out of Xanthorrhoea resin or grass tree. This is an old book, and it's a photograph from 1914, and it shows a young child, maybe about 8 years old, next to a Xanthorrhoea. And this is the particularly large species. Usually the ones I get around about where I live are about this size, but this is a monster. Alright, and it says King of the Black Boys. Okay, Margaret River, 1914. And at that time period, young children about this size would be sent out to collect Xanthorrhoea resin. Okay, and it was used a little bit in the commercial field as a furniture polish, but it wasn't really that successful. It was sold in the commodities markets and that kind of thing, and some was exported to Germany as a kind of a cheaper furniture polish or finish. But if we have a close look here at the resin, so that's kind of what you'll get. Depending on the species of the plant, the colour can change a bit. So what we want to do is we want to turn this into a powder like this, right? As you can see, I've processed a fair bit. Alright, so that's the first step. So we have to turn the raw material into the powder. And how I do that is pretty simple. This is an old coffee grinder that's pretty beat up. Just put it in. That's pretty painful to listen to, but very quickly that just grinds it down, and you'll end up with this orange dust, which actually smells quite nice. Okay, all right. So next step, and this is easy, right? This, you know, is to get some kind of container, some kind of second-hand container, and some kind of stick as a spoon. All right, and my recommendation with this is just kind of use what you need. All right, don't make up big batches. Just you make up little batches as you go. All right, so you just add your powder. All right, and then just methylated spirits. Okay, and straight away we get a really amazing color. Alright, we just get a little stick and we'll just work that in. Alright, so you just kind of like, you don't want it lumpy, you just want it maybe a little bit thicker of that. Alright, but you can see the color. I get a little bit on my finger. Just get that really amazing red color. So what I'm going to do with this one, this is the box I'm going to do. This is one of these sort of, you know, it's a box that champagne came in. All right, champagne is long gone. All right, but the box is pretty decent. So I saved the box, and I keep my sharpening stones in here. Okay, so it's just like something that's in the shed. So just for a bit of fun and for a little bit of a play around, I'm just going to maybe give that a light sand and take off some of the kind of writing, and give this a little once over with Xanthorrhoea resin. Sanded that back a bit, just to get a logo off, and this is just for demonstration purposes really, and just so you get an idea how it would work. And we'll put that guy on there. I've tried this on leather as well. Sometimes shellac was used as a leather treatment to dye leather, but I've tried this but it doesn't seem to work very well. It's just much better at wood. So you can see, it's kind of similar to French polish, just building up the layers. I think this is some kind of pine, this wood. Do you know what I mean? Well, I mean, you can see it's quite a radical difference, do you know, in the colour, and you can, I mean, it doesn't look that bad, I have to say. I'm just finishing it with a little bit of linseed oil, and I've actually worked a little bit of the resin in with the linseed oil, and that's another way of doing it, and it seems to work quite well. One of the main problems you'll probably get with this is just streakiness. If you do get a kind of patch where it clumps together, you can kind of, work it out and stuff like that. And then if you put another finish on top of it, like a linseed oil or something like that, it comes up all right. Do you know what I mean? If you did want to try this on a piece of furniture, I'd do a few tests first to see where you're going. I did this tomahawk. It turned out quite different. It turned out kind of like a little bit of a different shade. So obviously it depends on the wood that you use, the finish you're going to get. This is quite a bright finish, as with the tomahawk was a little bit of a more yellowy, more mellow one. This is quite in your face, kind of bright. But you can totally understand why people did this back in the day. If you didn't have a lot, it would certainly bring a little bit of life to your furniture. Let's carry on. So I've just finished it with a little bit of boiled linseed oil, which will take a while to dry. But it's turned out pretty good. Alright, pretty nice. Please don't damage any plants trying to get resin, okay? There's usually plenty on the ground if you're patient enough. And it's just damaging native plants, like just to get a little bit of resin out of them. It's not on. Okay, but you can really get a sense of, you know, I mean, that's pretty attractive from what was just a plain piece of pine. And what I'm doing is really just living history, because this would have been done thousands and hundreds of times in the past by people living in Australia. You know, and all those, you know, different types of homesteads and stuff like that, and you can really get a sense why they would do that. I mean, that's turned what was a very plain piece of wood, it was just like plain pine, into something that has a real vibrant colour to it. Do you know what I mean? And you could see why people would want to do that and bring that little bit of colour into their lives. You know what I mean? But anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll let this dry overnight, and then I'll put my sharpening stones back in it. And I'll catch you next time.